The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings. Football season never ends. The XFL DraftKings strategy, picks, and preview, trying to find the right tools to give us the right projections to cash in on some of these giant, at least week one XFL prize pools that I think you might want to check out. I'm not going to lie, 100K to first place. Nothing to scoff at when it comes to the XFL in terms of DraftKings. It's a lot of money at the top of prize pools. We're going to try to figure out the best way to get ourselves to the top of those prize pools, and no one better to join me in doing this than the co-creator of runthesims.com. And that's where you're going to want to go. Get the monthly over at runthesims.com right now. It's $49.99 for the month. And we all know, Justin Freeman, I should probably bring you in, that the prize pools for XFL might not be there in week 6, but they are there in week 1. So you're going to want those tools.
And we were going to take advantage of it. Like the world of uncertainty, we are embracing it. We're hopping in, buddy. Nobody is working harder than Furby and I are working behind the scenes on projections for XFL. It's funny. I've talked to a few other people in the industry, and they ask me questions. Where do you go? Where do you get information? What are you looking for XFL? And it's like, man, there is no shortcut when you're trying to find information on this stuff. So believe me, this is way better than doing it yourself. Go check out Run the Sims, get the monthly subscription, take advantage of this. And it's not just the one contest at 100K. We're starting to see showdown contests enter the lobby. We're seeing like some pretty high stakes. Like you got a luxury box for 2K, 10K up top. Hey, if you're feeling a little froggy, there's something for everybody. There's a $3.20 max. It's like if you've got the Super Bowl blues like we all did on Monday morning, it's time to jump back on the saddle.
So far, going through everything, like you've been around for XFL V1 when that season was canceled at the beginning of COVID, and then we did USFL last season, and it's the most profitable thing that I've ever played on DraftKings. I played props on it when I went to Prize Picks. Code DOP, by the way, at Prize Picks, if you want to get in and get a deposit match of up to $100. Links down in the description for all of that stuff. Same as runthesims.com. I just printed money the entire time. Now, that is not my expectation going into this. However, I do know utilizing the proper tools, as long as the person running the projections and putting in the inputs has a clue of what's going on, is in a small sport like this where there's not a lot of information, projections are going to be wildly all over the place, that unlike the NFL, and especially something like the Super Bowl, which is the most sharply capped thing there is, this is kind of the opposite of that, isn't it?
It is. And what's funny is like there's still a lot of edges for us to pick up on. Like there are ways that we can take the little amount that we do know and use that to our advantage. And, one of the things that was super profitable last year, if you're playing on the pick'em sites, was to, take a lot of the unders, because, a lot of guys we're seeing come in, play small portions of games, guys who you thought were like former NFL players and guaranteed to be in roles were obviously not in roles. And there's a pretty decent who's who of like former NFL players from guys you had on your fantasy team like 4 years ago. There's some of those types of guys in there where you're like, Eli Rogers, I know that name somewhere. Martavis Bryant, I haven't heard that one in a while. Or even Josh Gordon is in this league. And people are going to, really rush to click on some of those familiar names. I think it's going to be probably some of the not so familiar names, that are probably going to win people some money. You think about what you knew heading into USFL last year, and everybody was like, big time on the Tampa Bay Bandits. Tampa Bay Bandits don't even exist anymore, for one. And then everybody on that team was not very good. And, if you just kind of faded what the consensus opinion was, there are so many other places you can go. There's a lot of players that, I think everybody has kind of left for dead or has never even heard of before, that you could just simply rely on the projections to be directionally accurate. I think that's as good as we're hoping to get to, is directionally accurate, to come in and make, your way up the leaderboard pretty quickly.
So what I found during USFL season when we tried to run a lot of these lineups was I did great with the stacking, with the correlation, but every once in a while there would just be a guy who he was projected number one on the depth chart. Then we get to the game and the guy legit has 0 touches. That's just par for the course, isn't it?
It's you gotta lean on it. It's going to go to your advantage sometimes, and it's going to hurt you sometimes because there are no beat reporters for these teams. There's no Jameson Hensleys and Greg Almonds out there that are tracking the team and flying with them from city to city and giving you all the behind the scenes dirt. There's no Adam Schefter bombs coming at midnight before inactives. Like, we are oftentimes going to be learning information all the way up until kickoff and really sometimes beyond kickoff. I mean, one of the things that happened in the USFL last year was there was a player who was still listed on injured reserve. He ended up being in the game and playing a significant role, and everybody thought he was out and injured. So, yeah, like you would love to see these spring leagues have cleaned up their act a little bit. They just haven't done it yet. Maybe the XFL will be a little bit different, but as we record here Tuesday night, Pat, no injury reports to go off of. We do have an IR list, so we know a few people that aren't playing, but you can count on the little handy Run the Sims little injured logo guy to give you information on who's listed as questionable once we get that type of information.
So let's try to start off on what we know about the XFL. I'm going to shimmy over to DraftKingsSportsbook.com just for a moment, and we can kind of take a look at what's going on in terms of the odds for these games. How much stock do you put into how well these games are capped? Because every game is within a field goal spread. All the over-unders are 35.5 up to 37. So not much of anything here. It's like them throwing up their arms saying, we don't actually know what's happening here. And even when we take a look at the team futures, the St. Louis Battlehawks are 4-1 to win. The biggest long shot are the Orlando Guardians. They're 9-1. So no one has any clue who's good and who's bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you use last year's USFL as an example, the Birmingham Stallions were like last place in the league heading into it in terms of odds to win the whole thing. They win it all. They ship the whole thing, and of course, like it just goes to show, like whatever you think you know, you don't know. And so I think they're right to cap these games within a point or two. You could probably make a legitimate case that any team getting any points at all is a solid bet. Because simply we don't know. Like we don't know how these teams are going to mesh. We don't know stylistically what any of them are going to look like. And so how do we solve that? You maybe ask, like, how do you even create a projection then in that case? Because, but we do have some sort of identity associated with these teams based on who their coaches are. Arlington Renegades, they're a team coached by Bob Stoops. We've seen Bob Stoops before. We've got film on Bob Stoops as a coach. Seattle's coached by Jim Haslett and June Jones. And so those are a couple of guys that we know what to expect. So stylistically, we may have an idea of what to expect, but if the quarterbacks come out and they're terrible and they don't mesh and it's just not going to look good, like this is the first week of a brand new league that didn't exist a few months ago. So I think, yeah, in terms of taking advantage of those betting lines, I'd be tempted to hop on even more of the unders. Like you could expect to see some low scoring games, I think, in week one, even though they're already capped in the mid to high 30s. And any underdog points you can get your hands on.
Well, okay, so let's try to figure this out from a DraftKings perspective, because that's really where I think the big money is going to be made in the XFL. And knowing what we don't know is kind of up in the air. When do you think would be the best time? Like, let's say, I'm on Run the Sims right now. When would be the best time to actually generate my lineups? I would feel like the closer we get to lineup lock on Saturday for the first kickoff is probably going to be the best point, because at least then we have the maximum amount of information that we can have versus running it on a Wednesday versus a Thursday. Like the longer the week goes on, the more information we're going to have, right?
That's exactly right. And so the way I would approach that is if you want to build 20 lineups or 3 lineups or whatever you want to do, go ahead and do that today. Like get you some dummy lineups in there that you can, count on, but plan on this information changing like hourly on Run the Sims, because we're gonna learn more in this 5-day stretch leading up to initial kickoff, which is Saturday, February 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern. We're going to learn more in this next 5-day period than we've learned in the 5 months previous up to this point, where we're seeing teams start to leak depth charts. That's at least some clue. We're starting to see sort of the social media teams from each of these squads leak a little bit of information about, who to anticipate as captains and starting lineups. And we're just going to get more and more injury news. We're going to get inactives, hopefully, at some point before this game. I can't remember exactly how many inactives per team, but we're going to see some players not dress on these 51-man rosters. So we're going to get a lot of information. So whatever you build today, hold it loosely and be ready to part with it as we get more and more information. That'll be less so the case, I think, in future weeks, but this week more than any, let's be prepared to rebuild it all Saturday about noon.
Yeah, I think my strategy is just going to be don't run anything until Friday night. And then I've went and reserved my entries into the giant $15 already, because I really do think where it's such a week with so little information, we don't know what to expect. That almost seems like the perfect time to mass enter something. I'm not someone who really mass enters a ton of contests, especially in football and golf, because it's a more high variance sport. I tend to do that. In NFL, I like to find myself a $200 single entry, a $150 three max, and play that like a single entry. I'm not playing with the biggest budget over here, but I don't play in the Millionaire Maker. I don't play in the $8 or in the $9 slant and try to max that out. I don't do anything like that, but I think I'm just going to play 50 lineups into the $15 this week. And that's going to be all my exposure outside of showdown contests, which were uber profitable for me during USFL season, as I've just found the Run the Sims tool so easy to use with that, and just try to max the 50 max those out and try to get to the top of them. I think I won 2 of them, came second in 2 of them. It was crazy how well I did in showdown over that time. And I was having success in the larger field tournaments, but I felt like my edge was, it's not that it was gone, it just got lessened as the weeks went along. Whereas right now, with no one knowing anything, put my faith in the system that it's going to be able to beat the majority of people out there. So why not embrace the variance and try to go for that 100K?
That's exactly right. And there may be some ways that you can build smarter lineups by, sort of setting up some stacks for yourself within the system. Like, it's pretty easy once you go in and sort by quarterback to have an idea of where we're placing our confidence. And some of those quarterback names you will have heard of before, and we're still waiting to get some quarterback depth news on some other teams. But let's just take a team, for example, like Seattle. The quarterback's Ben DiNucci. Remember playing Ben DiNucci in DFS about 3 years ago?
Ben DiNucci of the Dallas Cowboys.
Exactly right. So he's back and better than ever with the Seattle Sea Dragons. Let's say we anticipate that he, a former NFL starting quarterback at one point in time, is capable of carrying the load. We feel pretty confident he'll be the starter there in Seattle. Always subject to change, of course. But then you're like, okay, well, how do I make a good Ben DiNucci lineup? How do I capitalize on that? Well, heading into XFL Week 1, we have really no idea what these receiving rotations are going to look like. And we've got a unique type of roster we have to build. So obviously in traditional NFL DraftKings for a classic slate, it's a 9-player roster, right? Quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, tight end, flex, defense. But in XFL DFS, it's a 7-man roster. So only 1 running back, 2 receivers, and really no tight end. So a receiver and tight end are the same thing in this, pass catcher. So 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 2 receivers, 2 flex, and 1 defense. Now, the double flex is interesting because what that's going to allow you to do is play up to 3 running backs if you want to. So, and I would recommend, especially in week 1, to go after those running backs. They may have slightly lower ceilings than some of the pass catchers, but the problem is we don't know who the pass catchers are. So go in and make it spit out lots of large number of running back lineups. Scatter up the exposure you have to the defenses. Try not to get focused in on any one defense. And I think you'll find some results that way, where you're playing 3 running back lineups and then you're making Ben DiNucci lineups. So we want to maybe take 2 stabs at Seattle pass catchers that could go with Ben DiNucci. And so when we go to receiver and then filter by Seattle, then we can see Josh.
Just hold on 1 second. Am I reading this right? Is Josh Gordon on the Seattle team?
Yeah, man, Josh Gordon, the Josh Gordon.
Like the Josh Gordon?
The Josh Gordon, the guy who had what, like 1,600 receiving yards about a decade ago.
So I've put together a quarterback with 2 wide receivers or tight ends, whatever it might be. And tight ends aren't coming up. I can tell you that much right now, just looking at Run the Sim. So I have Ben DiNucci and Josh Gordon along with Juwan Green for the moment. We can also make another one that's, you'd have to guess that Josh Gordon's like the guy, right? Are we just guessing that?
We would assume so. Like we're assuming he definitely gets first crack at any receiving work for Seattle.
So
coming
okay,
out
I'll put in double 15% exposure to a DiNucci, Gordon, Juwan Green, Ben DiNucci, Josh Gordon, and Jacor Pearson. That's a person. He plays for Seattle. We're throwing him in the stack.
Love
so now, there we go. And max flex exposure, I want to turn down wide receiver and just keep running back up at 200%, right?
Exactly. Yep.
All right. So let's generate some lineups and see what we got going here. All right. A lot of Ben DiNucci lineups with the guys that we want to have, our pass catchers in there. All right. So we got a lot on the go. John Lovett. I don't know if that's from like Saturday Night Live, John Lovett's, but he
love it or leave it, right? Yeah, he's apparently a highly drafted running back for the Las Vegas Vipers. Had a sip of coffee in the NFL this past season, but was a highly rated running back for this league. So yeah, so what you're getting there, Pat, is a lot of 3 running back lineups with a double stack coming from the Seattle pass catching core. And so you've really kind of locked yourself into saying, okay, really the only thing I have to get right here is that one of these guys from the Seattle pass catchers has a pretty dang good game. And so you've basically got a 1 out of 8 chance of choosing the right quarterback here. And so you've improved your odds by quite a bit. And so like traditionally, I would say you've built a pretty low ceiling lineup. The problem, but the good thing about XFL Week 1 is it's not necessarily about ceiling. Like you may not have to have a killer score to take down Week 1. You just have to avoid all the landmines. So you've created a lineup that makes a lot of sense for avoiding landmines. We found 3 of the like highest profiled running backs that you could choose from. You've got a defense of who cares because we don't know anything about the defenses. And so we basically just need to get the one thing right, which is Seattle quarterback is the guy you need, and he's going to take along at least one of those guys with him.
And we don't need to specify that it has to be Ben DiNucci. It could be AJ McCarron that we want to go with. But the projections in the lineups have spit out 93% of lineups feature John Lovett or Leave It, and Jermaine Martin and Matteo Durant. Those seem to be the 3 running backs that consistently pop up everywhere. After that, it's Devin Darrington. But that would seem like, hey, here are my 3 running backs that I'm going to play in the majority of my lineups. Now let me find one team overload stack to go with that. Like, do we even need to bring it back in these games?
Nope, I would not, because you're not banking on some sort of shootout environment. That's not entirely what we're after. I mean, granted, we take it, and we're not going to prevent that from happening as we make our lineups, but that's not really the angle here. Like, I think it's really more about just picking the things that you're most confident in. And so for like our Week 1 quarterback projections, we're basically handicapping those based on how likely we think each of those guys is as the starter. There's some quarterback situations we've got pretty close to 50-50 because there's just simply not enough news to handicap it. So I go in there and experiment around. If you want to kind of force some in, you can obviously use the stacks tool to force in whatever you want and get different types of lineups. But that's how I would build across the board. And obviously, like, we're not married to any of these names. They're subject to change between now and Saturday, and they definitely will.
So looking at the quarterbacks right now, I have up on the screen, DiNucci projects the best at $9,800 on DraftKings. After that, it's AJ McCarron at 10.5, Jack Coan for San Antonio, which looks like a bumblebee or a hummingbird type logo.
Brahmas. Do you remember the Rock's nickname?
Oh,
right?
So they're the Brahma Bulls?
They're the Brahmas, yeah, San Antonio Brahmas, and named in honor of the Rock.
So, and then you have Jordan Tumau, who's like the king of these leagues.
This is like his 3rd iteration. He's back in the XFL. He's a popular name. Like, I think people will be really happy to click on him. He was god awful in the USFL. I know there are some stats that people will cite and say like he led the league in touchdowns. Like the bar to clear there was ridiculously low, and he happened to play all the games for his team. That's
He
basically
was
what that
Tampa's
stat comes
quarterback,
down
wasn't
to.
he?
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was. The Tampa Bay Bandits.
He was St. Louis's quarterback the first time through in the XFL, then Tampa's
Yes.
quarterback in the USFL. Now it appears he's on DC.
Yep, the DC Defenders.
So Kyle Stoller was a guy who won me some cash in USFL.
Yep, former New Orleans Breakers quarterback Kyle Slaughter is with the Arlington Renegades now. We're not entirely sure that he's going to be the starter, but we're hoping to get some more information there too. There's a battle between he and Drew Plitt, a guy you've probably not heard of. I know I hadn't until I started digging into this. You talk about names you've heard of before. Brett Hundley, quarterback formerly from the Packers and spent some time with the Cardinals, I believe. He is a quarterback for Vegas, and we are currently unsure whether he'll be the starter, but hoping to get some more information for that throughout the week. So you can see, like, just as we talk through the quarterbacks, how much uncertainty there is. There's a lot of opportunities to take advantage of what people assume to be fact and maybe zig where other people are zagged.
Who do we think are like locked? Do we know anyone who is actually locked in at quarterback? Like, is it DiNucci and McCarron? That's why we're putting so much emphasis on them.
We feel really good about those first 3 to 4 on the list of projection, which is Ben DiNucci. There's just really not a competent backup, I don't think, that's emerged in that discussion for Seattle. So I feel good about Ben DiNucci. AJ McCarron, the guy who he was in competition with, Ryan Willis, actually just left the league. So he's probably going to be a USFL quarterback here in a couple weeks. So McCarron looks like he's pretty penciled into the starting role. Jack Cohn was announced today for San Antonio, and I think that's really where the confidence ends, because once you get to Jordan Ta'amu, you're in a range of guys where I think Ta'amu is going to be the starter, but it wouldn't surprise me if they actually went with some sort of platoon type system with their other quarterbacks. Dude, it's the Wild West. So just if you think that you're starting to as you're clicking on guys and you're looking at names you recognize and guys you want to jam into your lineup, just remember other people are too. And if they want to, then you should probably go a different direction.
Yeah, it's just we always kind of talk about ownership percentages and fade the chalk. It seems like it's even more important in a situation like this, unless these are legitimately the only guys that we know that are starting. By the time we get to Saturday, we're actually going to know who's who, or at least have a good sense of who's who.
Yeah, exactly. And for any of these where it's like still truly torn, make a lineup with each of those guys. Like if we get to game time and Cole McDonald versus Brandon Silvers at quarterback for the Houston Roughnecks is still a thing that we're debating, make a Cole McDonald lineup and make a Brandon Silvers lineup. Nobody will be playing them if we don't know. And so there's an opportunity to take a low owned stack all the way to the house, and you'll get a quarterback that's like 1% owned. And so, yeah, you got that one thing right, and you're now climbing all the way up the leaderboard. So don't be afraid to like just lean right into that. For the ones that we do feel pretty sure about, yeah, we just build exactly the way we talked about earlier with the 3 running back design. Sprinkle in your defenses, just try to make them make sense. Maybe pair up one of your running backs with his own team defense just to mix in a tiny bit of correlation. Other than that, that's pretty much how we're approaching it.
So if you go up to the DFS tools and then use Spring Football, and to get to the page I was just on, use the classic optimizer for Spring Football at runthesims.com. And if you want to go to Showdown, you can go to the DIY simulator. Now, there's 2 separate things you can do in here. You can go to the main slate and tinker around with everything that you want to put in. You can tinker around with market shares. If you want to say, hey, I think that Brett Hundley is going to be the starter, we're not going to see Luis Perez, well, you can just go customize that within the system and then rerun all your simulations over and over if that's what you want to do. But I want to focus a little bit on how are the contests for Showdown for DraftKings. They just became live right before we decided. I see Orlando and Houston is out already. Are the prize pools all right?
Yeah, it's not bad. 10K to first, and this is for just like This will be the second game of the slate. I think obviously DraftKings wants to drive as much action to that first lock time for the classic slates as possible. So no showdown on the first game, but we do have showdown on the second game, where we have a 30K prize pool with 10K up top. For the $10 entry, with 3,500 people in it. And then, yeah, there's a lot of other different types of contests there. There's $180, there's a $1, there's lots of different prize points, or excuse me, price points to get in there. I imagine we'll get contests for the day two games. There's 2 games Saturday, 2 games Sunday. That's not quite the cadence every single week, but it's going to be pretty close. There's going to be a mixture of Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays mixed in over the course of the season. But yeah, so there's definitely a good reason to hop in and print you out some lineups using the DIY simulator. Both the teams, unfortunately, right now have a ton of ambiguity with them. We don't know who the quarterbacks are yet for Orlando or Houston. So you're not going to get a ton of perfect lineups to go in just yet, but come back towards the end of the week and we'll have a little bit more clarity. And you can obviously go in and change those market shares and types of numbers as you want.
So one thing that I really enjoyed to do and had a ton of success with was kind of admitting to myself that I didn't know what was going on in every single game and sort of playing both sides. And then it would try to create different paths for me because obviously you can see I've ran the Sims. It's going to give me the bar chart of how often someone needs to be in a captain for Showdown, how often they're a flex option, and you can get all the like player projections for the games. If DraftKings does decide to put player props up, wait until like we know kind of for sure who's playing and who's not, and then just go run the projections because some of them might be. We had some in the USFL that were 30 yards off what the projection was versus the lines that they were posting. And normally they were all unders when it came to a lot of that stuff. So be cognizant of that going into it. But just when you go to your custom lineups, I found the easiest way to do it was what type of builds do I want? Well, I usually just played 2 4s or 4 2s. And those were just the lineups that if I played like 30 lineups, it'd be 30 lineups of the 4-2 for whatever team. And then just do that in reverse. Since I have absolutely no idea who's going to win anyway, I felt like that was my biggest advantage going into it. And that's how I ended up having so much more success in Showdown was play the variants, but at least try to make my lineups in a way that if one thing happens, I'm going to be completely right. Not only would I be completely right about it, I'd have a train of like 10 of those 15 lineups that were going to tell that same story.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to do it. That's a great way to just sort of diversify your portfolio in general is to take those different types of builds, because I think all too often people will just take the sort of best type of build and get really overexposed to a certain team having a really strong game. So if you can build a pretty diverse portfolio of lineups, I think that makes sense. Obviously on Showdown, I think you're going to want to force in a lot of defenses on these showdown slates because the quarterback play is going to be pretty bad. The scoring is going to be pretty low in general. It's going to be much easier for a defense to get into the winning lineup. So I wouldn't hesitate to go double defense on a lot of those. So if you're starting to see a lot of double D lineups, that'll be why. And then just go in there and go crazy with different types of textures with your builds, and you can have a lot of fun with it that way. I would stay away from kickers. I know usually like if you said we don't need a lot of points, you would go to kickers, but do keep in mind with this league there are no extra points for the kickers. Every conversion will either be a 1, 2, or 3-point conversion, which is going to be a traditional offensive play from either the 2, 5, or 10-yard line. So you get to pick how many points you want to go for after the touchdown, which is pretty cool.
Just to look back at the lineups that were generated just of all types, the salary left on the table, like the second most like optimal lineup in terms of what was spit out. It came out 5 times out of the simulations. So second most of anyone that I did, it was a 5-1 with Houston. So it's like a Houston onslaught along with the Houston defense with it that it uses $25,900. So half of my budget.
Yeah, there's plenty of room to make a good lineup.
I love it. This is going to be so much fun. I'm very excited to try to get the tools to be used at my disposal. Did I ever tell you that I went to an XFL game the first time around?
Oh, the 1.0 version, the one where they did like a scrum in the middle of the field to like see who gets first ball.
Yeah, I went to an Orlando Rage San Francisco Demons game. I forget what year it was. It might 2000, 2001, something like that. And it was the second week of the XFL. So there's still like a bit of buzz. Remember, week one was like kind of crazy. So I saw instead of a coin toss, they just had a sprint, a 50-yard sprint. And a guy blew out his shoulder diving for the ball in the opening sprint. I don't think they're doing that anymore.
I love it. They should. I wish they'd bring that back. No way it ever happens again. But man, that really was glorious. The XFL kind of changed football there for a short period of time. And they're still doing some innovative things that I think the NFL will eventually adopt. I think they all seem a little gimmicky right now. You know, obviously, I think the extra point type thing is a little gimmicky. But there's some fun things they're doing. You know, like the sideline reporting. They'll put the coach on the hot mic, or a player who just coughed up a fumble on the hot mic right after they do it, and just get the raw feedback right then. And you get some pretty cool sound bites. So, you know, it's fun. That's a good viewing experience. Put a little skin in the game here. Use Run the Sims. You know, get yourself a chance to go to first place, and you'll have fun watching XFL.
Yeah, like I said, I printed during USFL, and I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't watch a second of USFL.
You missed out.
Did I?
No, you didn't. I mean, you missed out on a few Scooby Wright, you know, interception for touchdowns. That's about what you missed out on.
Hey, there was what was it? Turpin was good, and then he got signed by the Cowboys.
Yeah, all not all pro, but Pro Bowler, right? So
yeah. So there is some talent lingering around in these leagues. Last time around, Tommy Maddox was the XFL MVP, and then he ended up making a Pro Bowl in the NFL with the Steelers.
There you go. Some of these guys just need a chance. That's what's fun. Like, these guys are all looking for opportunities. They're playing their tail off. This is their last chance for a lot of them. So I'll pull it for them. They make for some really good underdog stories.
Is this like the USFL where everything's in one place?
They are all it's kind of interesting. They're all practicing in one place. They're all in Arlington, Texas. And I think they have 4 different facilities in town that they practice at, but they will fly out to their home cities for their actual games. So like the DC team will go to DC for the DC game. Matter of fact, their opponent will be on the plane with them to DC to go play against them. And they'll fly back to Dallas for practice, or Arlington for practice. Interesting.
That doesn't sound like the most cost-effective way to do this.
I think there is a cost-effective element to it where they want everything in one place for as long as possible. But yeah, it does seem like they're burning quite a bit of jet fuel doing that.
All right, so that was the XFL preview. Hopefully you know a little bit more about the league and how we want to use the projections at runthesims.com to our advantage to try to attack some of these very early prize pools. So go become a sub at runthesims.com right now. They're all monthly during spring football, so you can jump in, jump out when you want them, maybe jump back in if there's a large USFL prize pool in about 8 weeks from now, now that you're acclimated with the system. But this is the week to hit go on all these DraftKings contests, because we might never see a $100,000 up top prize pool for XFL again. Did you win one of these in the XFL the first time around?
Yeah, the first XFL iteration, I was neck and neck for 100K. I ended up finishing second in that contest, which the payout structure was brutal. You finish in second, you end up with 10K in that one. So actually, it was just shy. Always a bridesmaid there.
Well, let's see if we can get one this time around. At least someone out there in the PME universe can end up with 100K cash in XFL. Like, you can put that on your gravestone. That's not going to happen to too many people. Like, all-time leader winnings, XFL DraftKings. I mean, pretty nice in your bank account. I'm not going to lie to you. So once again, runthesims.com to get your hands on all of the tools, all the projections, but you do want to wait. Only 7 spots to fill out in the 4-game slate going forward. It starts on Saturday, so keep checking back to make sure we have updated depth charts, updated injury reports, and the closer we get to kick off, the more information that we're going to have to make the projections better, that you can attack the props, the DraftKings contests, and everywhere where they do have projections up. I hope that ours are better than everyone else's. So smash a like to the episode, tell some friends, and that will do it for us. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Experience! Experience!